G'day, citizens. Welcome to Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined by Old Man Hurst himself, Algared. How you doing, bud?
I am alive. That is what I'll keep saying these days.
Yeah. You got a lot of well wishes and hoping you're okay from the 5th anniversary at Yacht Club yesterday, so I'll just pass those on to you.
Yeah,
So,
thank you guys for the concern and stuff. Just haven't been feeling. I'm glad that we're on school holidays at the moment because for last week I have not been feeling 100% at all. It's been
yeah.
feeling subpar.
All right. So, as far as I can tell, this one's about water and effects and rendering. I've noticed here that they keep calling it kind of what it is on the weekly report. So I'm going to try and start using their titling rather than using this titling from now on because this don't make no sense to me. So yeah. Anyway, let's have a look. Looks like it's going to be on water rendering and effects aggregate. Here we go.
Alpha 323 is just around the corner, and with that, a host of new gameplay and general life in the verse features. But it also includes a variety of technological improvements like the replication layer split, our initial implementation of Vulkan, image upscaling breakthroughs, and the subject of this week's show, changes to the water rendering and simulation system that were first discussed at last year's CitizenCon. So here now are the water wizards themselves to tell us more.
You've been doing this for a while now. Why do you think people are so interested in water?
In just any scenario is such a focal point. You go to a national park, you go see the rivers and the waterfalls, you're looking up stock photos of anything. It's people focus on the water because it is just so different to kind of anything else you find in nature. Like,
I think it's also because it's pretty complicated to do, yeah?
Yeah, well, I think people pay attention to water in games not because it's the thing that catches your eye in the world. It's a thing that never looks right in a game.
Yeah, hard to implement.
Yeah, it is hard to implement, and you can say, yeah, it just doesn't look right, and that's why in games people always draw attention to the water because that's kind of how you gauge a game, isn't it? It's the water effects are great, but you know. So,
well, it's similar to another system they're tackling in this game, and that's fire as well. Fire's never looked quite right either, but they're doing well with that as well.
Calling it now ISC. Next ISC is fire propagation. There you go.
Everything's unique and everything's different, but water is just something else entirely. Wow, you're making me sound like I'm a water cult or something.
When you came aboard, did you imagine you'd be the Moist Master?
I still don't refer to myself as that name, try as you might, Jared.
Hydro homie?
I guess I didn't see it being such a focus, but I'm glad that it is. It's good fun. I really like it. It's not all water. Water's just the nice things I get to talk about more. Someone asked me when I was at SitCon recently, what makes water 3D in games? What's different to anything else? And the truth is, you have to work to make it look like water because what we perceive as a volumetric liquid in real life, in graphics, we break down into different parts. You have the water surface.
It's something that is really hard to emulate. You know, some things in games are emulated just like they are in real life, but you've never really seen true fluid in games, and the only ones I can think of is they had those like small tech demos, and it's in a really confined space, and it's really intensive on the system.
I can remember having one of the things the Amiga used to do. I can't remember. I think it was the Amiga 2000, and they had this little thing where they could do water emulation, and it was like this little square. But they could get water looking really good, but you never saw it in games just because, again, as you said, it's just so difficult. There's so many bits and pieces, but in Star Citizen, we know they need that because we've got planets that are water worlds. We've got Toho, which is a planet with floating plant mass, which we have cities on. We got the one with the massive waves, and
it's almost like I knew that, and I put that as the thumbnail. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's definitely tech we need, is like breaking waves on the shore and these really big waves. So I'm really interested to know how they're going to do the big ones in the future. So yeah, right.
This, which is what you see reflecting, what you can look through, where you see your waves and your foam and so on. You have the fog underneath, and any particles floating around that makes you feel like you're inside water rather than just underneath a surface above you. And then you have all the effects that go to selling that, whether it be the lighting, the caustics, the boundary when it's intersecting your visor, or any of the splashes or simulation that we're going to move on to. So we showed a slice of what we've been doing with water at SitCon last year, and what we put out into 323 is a few steps ahead of that. So we're going to show you what we've been able to do since. Getting the rendering right was really key to making sure that the sim looks right, because anything that catches your eye and tells you this isn't real is going to stick out far more than any work that we put into the sim.
It has to be said that the way we rendered water in the past in Star Citizen was not really up to scratch. So we have spent a lot of time trying to make it a lot more realistic. Water is quite an interesting thing to render. It has very complex form in its dynamics and the way it animates, but optically it's very interesting too. In some ways, water is like glass. It's transparent, it refracts and distorts light which passes through it. And it also has a surface which reflects the environment around it. In some ways, water is also like fog. It obscures the background behind it, maybe completely obscuring it. And certainly impure water will have suspended particles, which...
So essentially, I'm hearing the surface is like glass, but the actual underneath is like fog. And I'd agree with that statement. Because it's really, again, you know, we're talking about like representations. It's really a flat plane that has a fake other side. It's essentially like a different atmosphere on the other side. Yeah, again, because they can't truly represent the whole thing as a physical fluid entity.
He was talking about the impure water having stuff, and earlier I heard him say rendering the stuff that's floating in the water, and so
yeah, like the seaweed, which
like
is
the seaweed, but that will also come into sewage.
Yep.
So you know, so you can see the sewage and the waste matter.
Yeah, I think
floating on top, and
I think what we're seeing here is the first implementation. I think they're going to go into different water types, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't go into different liquids either, like sludge or acid or even magma with a different viscosity, if you know what I mean.
That's it. I think the advantage of getting, if they get water tech right, it means they can get
other fluids. Yeah.
Other fluids right as well. So
yeah.
Cells reflect light and give the water a cloudy hue. The water surface may feature foam, certainly where waves are occurring or at shorelines. One thing we wanted to do was improve the way we render foam on the ocean surface. This involved having it show detail when viewed close up, and also having it disperse in a very naturalistic way, where the foam breaks apart into small patches and the bubbles dissipate. One thing we did to get the details on the close-up views of foam is photograph a pan of soapy water. This gave us the required detail to project onto the foam surface and give the look we wanted.
The only thing, and I was just noticing about the foam, is none of the bubbles pop. Now, I know that sounds like such a small thing, but moving foam does that. And if you watch it again and notice, it never pops. So it would be kind of cool if it was slightly, ever so slightly animated. That I don't know how much extra performance power that would take, but it'd be kind of cool if it did. But
yeah, and like Strike, the performance issues this can have.
Yeah.
How's it? I can almost see this being Lag City. It's got that potential to really screw up the game. So.
All right.
It's nice to think that all of the foam you see on any ocean in the verse started its life in a soapy pan of water in my kitchen. In Star Citizen, players can enter the water. This means they can view the water from underneath the surface. So we spent lots of time making sure underwater views look correct, showing fogging and so on. Similarly, when the player enters the water line may cut across the player's visor, and we took a lot of time getting that to render correctly and show it as expected.
I really think the improvements that have gone into the rendering of the water, especially the surface, the fog, it's leaps and bounds ahead of what was in 322. So from rendering, let's move on to surface simulation.
Yeah, see, that shot right there, Algared, like you don't ever see that 3D stuff in game. It's too much work.
No, and it's just because
Yeah.
chews up so much
Yeah.
space.
Well, it essentially means you've got to have this whole area have extra polygons and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure they've got it lotted in such a way that like it's got extra polygons here where it's needed, but over here it's like just giant planes. Because again, the further away you get from what you see, I'm sure they're gonna. Yeah, let's have a look.
Yeah.
What we wanted to do was provide some next level visuals to go with all the things that can interact with water in our game. With the nature of the sandbox universe, there's just so many ways you can interact with it. And with all our spaceships and the colossal thrusters and wakes they can throw off, we really wanted to be able to match that with the water rendering. The way we decided to approach this, instead of having a square that follows the camera, like many games do, of water simulation, we wanted to have something more powerful than this. We wanted you to be able to stand at the top of a mountain and watch a ship fly across a lake underneath, drawing the wake behind it. And you wouldn't get that with a fixed square around the camera. So
Yeah.
the approach we took was something called region-based surface simulation. This allows us to allocate areas where we need to be simulating and propagating water waves at any given moment, regardless of where the camera is. We can allocate and deallocate these as we need, and we can have a pool of them of any size depending on the spec of your PC. You can actually change the maximum allowed regions in your graphics options.
That also hints at it being server-side, client-side, not server-side. But anyway.
On medium setting, you can have 32 regions simulated at the same time. You can even go to a very high setting, which would give you as many as 128. To choose the best regions, we try to have the closest and most important ones show up and call the other ones. The fact that we sort it by the number of interaction and how strong they are means that only the most important.
Oh, there's your Lord Algared.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, the closer it is, the more information. The further away, no one gives a shit.
Important ones will be shown on screen, which helps because having a little interaction right in front of you could be useful, but it might not be visible when there's a very big ship going right by and creating a huge wave.
Sounds like you've built a very efficient system then.
We've tried to build a very efficient system.
In order to interact with things that are in the water, we first need to know that they are there. We've hooked up to the physics system so it sends us events when physical objects like boxes or the player or bits of ship debris are in or floating in the water. From there, we can work out how much water has been displaced and the velocity and pick an appropriate simulation wave speed to match those.
So that indicates salvage in water.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that too, and the future of certain ships would sink, wouldn't they? So you'd also have to kind of like water recovery type thing. So like, are we going to be going underwater to get shit back too?
Are we going to be going underwater to rescue people?
Oh, yeah, like trapped in a submarine type of scenario. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so that change, the possibilities.
Yeah, it's just expanded
I'm
it quite a
mind-blowing
bit.
at the start to think of it. It's not only is it salvage, but it's rescue. Not on top, not only on top of the water, but below the water. That means if we've got to do it below, we need to be able to swim underwater or have ships or vehicles that can go underwater.
Yep. Can you take your 85X and it converts into a submarine? You know, that type of thing. You know, and you go for your yellow submarine moment under the ocean. Yeah, true.
Have to get an 85X now that's yellow. Thank you, Execute.
From there, we can apply forces to different texels of each sim region, which then propagate as we update that region over time. As well as responding to physical objects in the water, we can also hook this up to other input types.
For example, we could have a ship falling into water, creating a huge displacement.
So I just think in there, we've got explosions. Does that mean water can get deep enough now that we have implosions as well?
Now, I also noticed both when they dropped the box and the ship went in, I was expecting a bigger splash.
Yeah, that's again tier 0.
But
again, do you need a splash from a little box? I guess if it's really close, yes, you do. But like if you were in a ship that was nearby, no.
If I was on the mountain, no. But when he dropped the box close to him, I'd have expected a bigger splash. And he did wipe his visor, which indicated there was a splash, but you just didn't really see it. And the ship splashing there, okay, from a distance.
Yeah. But you think about
obviously, but
all that things you talked about before, though, like being under the water and search and rescue and stuff, that implies implosions and flooding of vehicles and stuff like that. Can you imagine, like, a javelin in space where it's got all those explosions and sucking people out the corridors, but by the same token, the same ship and it's flooding? That's mad. And that gameplay would be nuts, trying to get out of a javelin and using an escape pod that shoots you up to the surface. That game, I want to play that. That's almost like the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea scenario.
Subnautica.
Yeah.
Subnautica, yeah.
And like there's literal, you can hear rooms imploding as the shields fail and stuff like that. And yeah, that'd be mad. All right.
Yeah.
But we can also have footsteps near the beach. Or we could also have bullets and missiles and explosions. For the player, this means that you can be way more immersed in your game, as you can see the direct effects of what you are doing, how you are playing on the water.
We wanted to be able to create the best visual impact we could.
Noticing like how cinematic it is, Algared. Like we keep taking this shit for granted, but like again, it's just it's too common now. Like we're seeing this shit, these massive, insane cinematic shots that just
we are spoiled, and it is really just impressive to see how awesome it looks, and the one thing that I've noticed a couple of times as we're watching stuff up underneath the water. They haven't the land doesn't seem right.
I've noticed that too. Not as muddy and as
and it's because the terrain is still there, whereas normally underwater, if it's sandy, the water has washed away those dunes and
if you
look,
if you have an object under the surface, the mud kind of goes around it a lot more, where on the surface the gravity kind of holds it down. So there's definitely a more murkiness. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, you're right. Some of the ones I've seen, they've literally got the same terrain on the edge of the shore, but not underneath. And again, tier 0.
When you look at it, it has just looked like it's what it would be on dry land.
Well, in a way, wouldn't planetary textures be a different department? Because these guys are working on water, not the planetary textures. So that's probably a part of the planetary team stuff. So,
well, I would still imagine water is part of planetary tech because it's all related.
But again, it's technically a part of the planet, not a part of the water. Is what I'm trying to get at.
We're talking the ground underneath, which is But and so that may be something that's coming down the track. I hope that it's something that gets developed down the track.
Yeah,
because it's not the water itself. It's interesting. Usually, I look at water in games and go, it doesn't look real. I'm not looking at the water and going, that doesn't look real. I'm looking at underneath the water and going, that's not 100%. And when I saw the seaweed underwater, there was one of the shots, and you could see the seaweed kind of looked. It didn't quite look right from the side on view. I can't really explain it. It just looked.
It's just showing they're still working on it, I think.
But it's showing it is a work in progress, as the screen says. This is a work in progress. But man, anyway, let's get going.
Without having an impact on your bandwidth and server performance, etc., especially as we move into bigger and bigger player counts. So our water simulation is done on the client and is visual only, and I think that way we get the best possible result out of it.
All of the information that we get from the different systems.
I think the only difference there would be if they have a really big wave, because like on that planet that's got the big waves, and that would need to be server side. But again, it's only really got to tell you where the entity is. You could still have different effects at the client side. So
then package it and send to the water buffer.
Tying this all together is the water buffer. This allows us to take in inputs from multiple systems to the shape of the water surface, and then use that information in lots of other systems, such as additional effects, and of course rendering the water. Each patch of ocean is able to render with both the water buffer on and off. If it is off, it simply shows the ocean waves according to where it is on the planet.
More LODs, essentially.
If it is on, it first populates the water buffer region with the wave data in that patch. We then add in any simulation data or data from other inputs, Then when we come to render the ocean patch, we look up again from this buffer where we have the total added together result of both the original ocean waves, the simulation, and any other inputs. To copy the simulation in, we build a mesh that covers parts of the water buffer that we're going to write into. The UV coordinates of each vertex in that mesh point to a specific part of the region atlas. This allows us to read specific parts of simulations and input them to other parts of the water buffer, and it allows us to do it in just one draw call. Having the water buffer set up like this to receive multiple inputs leaves the door open for implementing multiple types of simulation going forward. For example, beach crest waves could be input into this system. This means as well that any other system nearby can look up to see where the waves are and see how high.
I wonder if that also leads into those big waves for that. I can't remember the planet's name, but you know the one I'm talking about, don't you?
Yep. Yeah, well, even Tokyo with the or water world with plant masses that float on top of the surface, and we have cities built on those. That will have the same type of tech.
It's almost
So,
like
yeah,
it's almost like I knew that, and it's the thumbnail. But anyway, all right.
high the water is. We use this to drive a number of different effects.
Having the water buffer allows us to have the graphic system query what nearby waves are doing. This allows us to render things called caustics. Caustics are where the ocean surface is focusing sunlight onto areas nearby. So, for example, it may...
So that's a really good example of under the surface being the same as the surface. They would have a lot more silt around them and stuff, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And these pieces of pine tree, I'm assuming they're pine tree, would have be a lot more silt covered. That's a really good example of the stuff they need to work on.
But I assume that'll come. But
Yeah.
That rivers would tend to bring the silt down, and whereas the hill's got it going one way, the water flow is going to have it.
And also, if there's that much wood on the, why isn't there pieces floating on the surface? You know.
Yeah, and I'd expect in a situation like that, you would have pine needles and branches and stuff floating on the surface. But again,
if you've ever seen pine trees near a beach, they can literally dye the water like tea.
Yep.
Yeah.
But as we've said several times.
Yeah. Tier zero. We're finding things to give feedback.
All right.
We're trying to find things to give feedback on, and that's something. But again, you can tell it's tier zero, and it's multiple departments that have to work together. Clearly. All right.
Yep.
focus light from the sun onto the seabed, making certain bright patches animate around. And similarly, light can be reflected upwards onto the side of a vehicle, for example. Caustics are a very important visual clue for water rendering, and leaving them out would have meant the water did not look correct.
Well, that was a look into all the work that went into the water in 3.23. The whole thing is pretty sweet. I'm really happy with how it looks. The team has done a fantastic job. Planet Tech have got some really exciting things coming. I'm really, really excited to dive back into the planets of Star Citizen. I hope you guys enjoy it.
I think he just implied there some of the stuff we were talking about with the planet stuff.
Yeah.
So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that the updated rendering system makes water look more like water, that region-based simulation makes water behave more like water, and that the new water buffer itself hooks into all the other systems, like physics, which will get its own series of improvements down the line, to make water interact better with the variety of things that players throw into it. Boy, you love throwing things into the water, don't you? For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thanks for letting us share the process of game development with you, and we'll see you all here next week.
Nothing at the end, which is different. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that was interesting. To kind of see where it's going, tier 0. Yeah, I think you kind of heard our feedback as we went along. I think it's really different from most games, Algared. You don't see that level of detail because it's usually too much work for no payoff type of thing.
Yeah, and yeah, you can just, and that's probably why games don't do it. It's just.
Oh, I think I've lost you for a second. The one thing I'll say, Algared, is I think it's leading to, like we said, that like if you go into that level of detail, it's got to be something to do under the water as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you're back. You're saying?
Oh yeah. I do think it really does give an indication of what's coming. Like there's so much in there, like fishing, salvage underwater, rescue underwater, implosions.
I can even think of growing certain seaweed as a plant underwater. Like almost everything you do on the surface or in space, you could. It's kind of like this weird hybrid between the two, if you get what I mean. Yeah, agriculture, animals. Like fishing's a big one, obviously, but like even hunting, like hunting a certain predator or something like that. With the, and we know that's going to be a thing. The big game hunting.
Kraken.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it could be a real kraken that the kraken's named after. You know, like So yeah. Is there anything you want to hear in the comments below, Algared, from people?
So what are you guys looking forward to in with water? Are you looking for? Are you like me? You're seeing the water looking great, but the planet where it interacts with the water not looking up to speed at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you expect CRG to fix that? Are you looking forward to fishing or big game hunting or rescuing underwater? What does that mean for ships and vehicles?
I think that's
or
what,
even EVA underwater or swimming.
Yeah, I think that's what I would ask. Do you think it also leads to gameplay things? Like, are they going to this level of detail because they want to add in the way we interact with it as well? Because I think that would be really cool. To be honest, it could be just pie in the sky dreaming, but like, man, if you're going to go this big and this bold, like, why wouldn't you be going there? So that I don't know.
I think if I was
Algared, I don't need you to answer it.
Yeah, I would hazard a guess and say because they are going into it. Yeah,
I agree.
I will.
I agree. Right, with that then, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Thank you to everyone that went an extra mile on the end credits on Patreon. Really appreciate it.
Indeed.
Right, he's been Algared.
He's been Execute, and we're out of here. Take care.
See you, citizens.